I feel like a lot of people view safety pretty incorrectly. It's usually propped up as something of massive importance and that people are constantly thinking about. However, I feel like safety is really only important or crucial in some scenarios, and in a lot of ways, it can actually be a bigger hindrance than help. And that's because being safe is really a vessel for containment. Just think about a physical safe itself. It's just containing something and making it so nothing will happen to that. So if your mindset is improvement, growth, getting bigger, getting better, safes are not the right thing to do. Safes are to remain the same. So if you've got something perfect, if you don't want it to change at all, then sure, safety is fine. But if you need to grow or improve or get something entirely new, safety is going to do nothing for you. And so even though there are certain times where, sure, safety is great and there are certain things that you really want to be safe, like transportation. Most of the time you don't have to worry about your vehicle being at peak performance. You just got to get from one spot to the other. You want to be safe during that time. It's not all about getting there as fast as the car possibly can. You just don't want anything to happen badly in that scenario. Sure, being safe in that scenario makes plenty of sense and people put a lot of emphasis on this. So that's an example where safety should be important and it's good that it is. It's almost always going to come at extra costs in those scenarios, so it does still have something detracting for that benefit that you're seeking, even if that's the case. Which brings me to the other thing about safety, is that people view it with a lot more certainty than they probably should. You can do just about everything to make whatever you're doing more safe, and you can still get burned. Playing something safe or doing something the safe way, taking all these precautions, can often be a lot of extra effort and expense, and you can still end up having the same problems and maybe not be any better off than if you had done nothing. But there's a lot of these things that people sometimes do that they think is kind of guaranteeing safety that isn't really the case. For example, if you have experience with matrimony, where you're talking to people online, a lot of times you'll be initially met with kind of hesitancy of meeting up with someone, and they're just kind of concerned. They'll give out the response, "Oh, I don't know, you could be a murderer." And sure, that is, I guess, a possibility, not very likely, but a possibility. So you could worry about that if you want. But the funny thing to me always is that there's these little checks that will convince them that they are now safe. Like if you're willing to make a FaceTime call, or if you go on a date or two, that you're suddenly no longer eligible to be a murderer, and then they somehow feel safe now. As if it's impossible for someone to act normal. That's the easiest thing for anyone to do, even if you are a very unstable person. You see it all the time. You have examples all across you. If you were a murderer, it would be pretty easy to act normal. And if that is the vibe that they're giving off, they're probably more likely to be a murderer than if they were just outwardly being strange. So I feel like there's a lot of things that make people feel safe, but realistically are doing nothing to improve their situation, which is another reason why I think people misunderstand safety. And really, no matter how safe you try to be, you will never have certainty, especially in something where you are trying to grow, you're trying to get something new, you're trying to improve. There is no guarantee, and a lot of the things that you think will make it seem more safe could be completely empty. And so I feel like I put very little emphasis on safety at this point, just because there's so much uncertainty, as well as it kind of inhibits growth in a lot of scenarios. So I feel like I'm going to put less of my energy in trying to ensure something that's uncertain anyway in safety. And if you put less emphasis on that and are willing to take more risks or do things that some people are concerned with and unable to because they're concerned about safety, it just allows you to do more. Sure, you might get burned more. Sure, you're going to get burned probably either way, but you're probably going to gain a lot more taking this approach anyway. So that's kind of what I've switched up to generally. But anyway, what I've decided to change the word safe to is something to combine the ideas of how it's involved with risk, and how that's inherent whether you think you're safe or not. And also I wanted to have the idea of it being something that a lot of people don't really understand exactly well. So the first thing that came to mind was like quantum theory. So I'm like, all right, we'll take the word quantum, we'll take the word risk, we'll kind of throw them together. However, we're going to change spelling a little bit to use letters that I find safe and that I enjoy. And we have some of my favorite letters in this word, as I went with Qwantisk, because I love Q's, W's, K's, and then all the interior letters in there I'm alright with too. I enjoy those. And while renaming it as Qwantisk, because then that shows that it's kind of like quantum theory, which most people don't understand. Then there's the end of risk, and also, I mean, the whole word of want is in there too, which most people want a lot of safety. So that's how we have all those links there. Those are our remembering devices for getting all that right, and that's what we got. Now let's move on to our song and video of the day. Song of the day is Overdrive by Drake. This comes from his new album, Honestly Nevermind. This is probably my favorite song off the album. It builds quite a bit. It's got a really groovy backing that just improves as the song goes. And even though I wasn't blown away by this album, and I haven't been by quite a few of his last ones, it was still pretty solid, and this song especially is really great, and one that will probably be in fairly heavy rotation for me. Then for the video of the day, I chose the opening scene of The Dark Knight, which is the bank heist controlled by the Joker. And I wanted to do this because, one, it's my favorite movie of all time, and I haven't really shown a whole lot about The Dark Knight in general in this series, but I decided to do that. Plus, they are, of course, breaking into like this massive vault and safe, so they're breaking through that Qwantisk and getting all the loot. And this is such a brilliant, captivating opening scene that I remember when I first saw this movie too, I was quite young at the time, was just like pretty terrifying to me too, as was actually much of this movie, but it really gripped me and just kind of stayed in my mind. And then as I kept viewing it and viewing it, I really came to love this movie a lot more than kind of the initial fear and surprise that came with this movie for me initially. But that's everything we have for the Daily Do. Peace out.